This episode is brought to you by David, Darren, Karen and Derek, Jeffrey, Michael and Suzanne, and Alan, this week's newest patrons. We spend a lot of time around here talking about boats that you should buy with your hard-earned dollars, but this week we're going to take a minute to talk about boats that you shouldn't. What is a red flag big enough to stop you in your tracks when you're looking at a boat?
This week on Everything You Need to Know, the $130,000 sailboat you shouldn't buy.
What made me think of doing this episode are two stories that are sort of unfolding in my life right now. First is a really cool couple that are moving back to my neck of the woods, and they're looking for a boat to buy, and they're looking to join a yacht club. Now, I'm Commodore of our club, so they reached out to me for a tour and to ask some questions, as you do when you're looking to set down some roots in a club. I gave them a tour, and we sat and chatted for a little while. I introduced them to some of our members, the usual stuff. But this couple also watches this YouTube channel. And the tour of the club wasn't the only thing that they were after when they came to meet with me. They also hired me to do a pre-purchase inspection of a boat that they were looking at. And I'm going to show you this boat. And people hire me for stuff like this because I'm going to come at the boat without the rose-colored glasses that a buyer might have on when they look at it. I mean, we all want to see the good in the boat that we're looking at, how it'll suit our lives and the things that we like about it. So it's easy to miss stuff. I also come with loads of experience and a history of marine surveys. So after we were at the club, we took off and we arrived at this boat that they're looking at. And they had already looked at it. They looked it over. And they were actually considering making an offer as the owner was there. So they just turned me loose on it. And the asking price on this boat was 17,500 Canadian. And it's a Catalina 30. But I knew from the start that it didn't have any semblance of electronics. It didn't even have a working depth sounder, let alone a chart plotter or anything fancy like that. Within the first hour, I found a very large soft spot in the coach top. It was delaminated and soft, about 18 inches across, up next to the mast, with no obvious point of water intrusion, so that's something to figure out. I also found that the coach top halyard winches were both just free spinning in both directions. The pawls weren't engaging anymore. And then the larger sheet winches on the coamings were chunky and clunky and in need of a service. We looked over the whole boat inside and out, and we found very little else wrong with it, but then we came to the bilge and the top of the keel. Now, the Catalina 30 is a shallow bilge, and the keel bolts are all right there, but they all looked really good. But the floor of the bilge around the keel bolts had large spider cracks all the way from the front to the back, and near the back I saw the big red flag that sort of stopped us in our tracks. The floor of the bilge fiberglass was sort of puffed up in one spot, and it was split wide open about that big with a puddle of water inside, and I picked at the hole with a screwdriver, and I pulled up slivers of plywood completely soaked into mulch. It almost looked like the boat was set down too hard on the keel somehow, or stored wrong, and it pushed the bilge floor upwards. I guess also possible is from all the cracking, which we still don't know why that's there, water might have gotten into the plywood, and then froze over the winter, expanding and then cracking the bilge floor upward like that. Either way, this is a pretty serious red flag that would need to be addressed before I would call that boat safe. And you'd have to grind down all the glass and replace whatever wood is there to really figure out what's happening. And you might have to undo the keel bolts, which, if you can avoid that, you should avoid it. Our next story comes from a YouTube viewer again, and this is somebody who hangs out with us on the Lady K Discord channel, and he's actively looking at Island Packet 27s right now, and one such example had piqued his interest lately, and he's been in negotiations on this boat. Now, the boat, of course, comes with a survey, and the asking price is somewhere in the $30,000 neighborhood, and everything on the survey more or less looks good, but it said little to nothing about the engine. So the buyer, he opted to have an engine survey done specifically on the engine. And the last thing you want to do is pay 30 grand for an Island Packet and find out there's a $10,000 engine job that needs doing. Now, the engine survey found all the usual little things that you might think. A loose fitting here, some old coolant lines that really need to be replaced, a leaky fitting on the fuel filter, and a failure to fasten down some of the lines and wires. This is all normal stuff as part of an engine survey, but they also did an oil analysis. And this is where things get weird. The analysis came back showing high amounts of silicon in the transmission and then high amounts of copper and iron in the engine oil. Now, this may not be enough to completely condemn an engine, but it is a good sign of wear that gives you an indicator of the overall health of the engine. These things are worth doing. Now, would it stop me from buying the boat? Perhaps not, and it might not stop him either. My question became, is there anything else that meets your needs in a boat at this price point? And his answer was yes, there's lots of boats that meet his needs in this price point. So it seemed like enough to suggest that maybe he move on and keep shopping. I mean, patience is key when you're going to drop 30 grand on a boat, and you're going to save a lot of time and money by just being patient and finding the right boat. Now, I try to help people as much as I can with requests like this, but I get ultimately way too many of them to keep up with. So I've dedicated a page over at ladyksailingcom where people can request a consult for a small donation. A consultation is an hour where we sit down and we get answers to your questions, whether it's in person or over the phone, FaceTime, whatever works best for you. If you need help or want to chat with something like that, I'll leave a link down in the description. And hey, while we're here, if you want to be part of the conversation and you're not already subscribed, hit the little subscribe button down at the bottom so that you don't miss any new episodes. And consider joining us on Discord. We just basically talk about boats every night and sometimes different kinds of rum or scotch if Digi's on there. But it's good fun, and let's talk about some boats now. This first boat is an ultra cool expeditionary style of boat. It's a Van de Stat 41 footer sitting in Panama right now, and I absolutely love this thing for what it is. At first glance, she looks like a very well outfitted ocean cruising boat that's already been a lot of places, and it looks ready to keep going. And at first glance, it seems to be very well appointed as a cruising boat. It's ready to go just about anywhere. She's a very handsome hull design with a cutter rig, and they take the time to photograph all the extras and spares that she comes with, from medical kits to spare parts. I think I even saw a head gasket in here. She has roomy looking staterooms and nice wood finishes throughout the boat, and it seems to be in great shape for the amount of miles that I imagine are on this gorgeous boat. The head is really big, the galley's big, and all the mechanical stuff looks to be in good order. Even the saloon is massive and looks like a great place to hang out and relax. What bothers me about this boat, though, is the keel. And you might be looking at this thinking, wow, it looks like a really fast boat. Look at the size of that keel. And it does, but in this picture it does, and in this one it does. But then you see this picture where the keel seems to just be gone. This is because the keel on this boat is retractable. It retracts straight up into the hull like a dagger board. An interesting thing to have if you're going to be cruising in shallower waters like the Bahamas or the Keys, but some of the time you're going to be way out in the ocean and you need a huge deep fin for that performance when you want it. And then there's this picture where she's clearly sitting on the bottom, or this one where she's completely beached at low tide. Now, I'm not saying this is bad. The keel on this boat is actually designed to be able to take this sort of weight and do this sort of thing. What my problem is here is a retractable keel scares a lot of people, and rightfully. And this one is a very unique design. And looking at the pictures, the owner has had no problem putting the whole weight of the boat on this keel plenty of different times, even once at a pretty hard angle. Yes, the description says nothing of the keel, and that bothers me. How it works, or what sort of service is needed, or when it was last serviced, whether or not it's been inspected or even looked at. The single biggest thing about this design on this boat is that keel. That's what's special about this boat. And not a word about it in the description. Now, could this be a great cruising boat? Yes, very likely. It looks like it is. But the lack of information in the ad is enough to make me just hit the back button on my browser and go look at something else. Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to really make this whole channel possible. Big shout out to all the patrons who have gotten us this far and sort of keep us going. It's very much appreciated. If you'd like to help support this channel, please consider becoming a patron. Next up on the boats not to buy at 130 grand, and the Irwin folks are going to hate me for this. And I hate to judge a whole manufacturer based on a couple of mistakes, but I have heard it said more than once, and not by me, but I've heard people say it, friends don't let friends buy Irwins. This then is a 1978 52-footer, and everything about this boat, looking at the pictures, screams Irwin, from a very chunky and clunky design to the center cockpit to the deck saloon. This has all the markings to be sort of a great Caribbean cruiser, and to be honest, they are pretty good at doing just that. So what's the red flag here? Honestly, for me, it's the price tag. It's $130,000. Every picture I see of this boat has something in it that scares me. I'd expect a $130,000 boat to be in a lot better shape than this thing is. And every picture I'm seeing something like rusty rigging or poorly bedded port lights to an interior that's just a mess. I mean, maybe this wicker looking bench is famous in the bench world and it commands an extra $100,000 all on its own. I just don't see anyone in the market for a $130,000 boat, and they stumble across this and look at it and think, yes, I want a rusty old Irwin with no interior. Now, am I being a bit mean? Yeah, perhaps. But that's the whole point here. A boat like this at this price tag needs to be cleaned up and it needs to be staged well to command any reasonable amount of money. It is a great Caribbean cruiser, for sure. It's an Irwin 52, but this example is just way out of its depth here. Now, that's a lot of red flags to give you some food for thought when you're boat shopping, but let's talk about a boat with a lot of green flags, for comparison's sake, that's priced properly and actually listed in a way that it might actually sell. Some good pictures and a solid description. A boat where they sort of do everything right. This, then, is an Island Packet. You knew there was going to be one at 130 grand. This is an Island Packet 38, and it's sitting in Maryland right now, and right off the hop, she looks good. I mean, she's yellow because she's an Island Packet, but I'm seeing newer canvas sunbrella all over the place with no visible wear. The teak looks like it's in need of a good treatment, but that's the beauty of teak on these Island Packets. It doesn't matter how bad it looks. As long as it's there and it's whole, all you need to do is put in the elbow grease and lots of polishing and it'll look fantastic. I see a proper cruising anchor with that rock nut on the roller. I see a whisker pull and a self-tacking jib. All look to be in good order. I'm seeing nice clean decks with no discolored areas, no rust, nothing really screaming at me that there's something wrong with this boat. And when we head inside, it's more of the same. We see a really nice clean saloon, no mess. All the beds are even made. Everything looks very tidy. This boat looks like the owner actually cared about it, and they took good care of everything in it and on it. But all the wood looks really tired and weathered, which again, it's teak. It can be restored. I think this would be a great point to make if you're looking at this boat to start talking the price down a little bit. The woodwork needs to be brought back to that showroom shine, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It won't be an expensive thing to do. It'll just be work. And if you can knock, say, $5,000 off the price, maybe $7,000, and do all that work, it's probably worth it. Lastly, on this boat, and what's very important is this is how much Island Packets cost. They are $130,000 for this boat. You can really shop around with this model in this year of boat and find them selling all the time for this kind of money. So it's not just a price out of nowhere that they made up, and they don't need to justify it anywhere in the ad. It just is what it's worth. Okay, folks, that's it for this week. Annapolis is creeping up really quick. This time next week we'll be down there. If you want to have dinner, I'm thinking on the Friday night we're going to go have a big old dinner somewhere. I understand Mike's Crab Shack is now closed for the season, but we'll find somewhere else to hang out. See you all next week. Until then, keep the heavy side down, but not too far down. Bye.